Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to my Politics 2100 video cast here on YouTube. So this episode I'm calling the right-wing project to pervert and quote-unquote overturn deontological ethics. And this is, there's some fancy words in that title, but I'm going to make the argument that this is essential to understand the state of our nation today, and also how the right wing has evolved into a neo-fascist and, somewhat a lawless movement that is also at the same time in many seats of power in the U.S. Senate, in the Congress, and also many state legislatures. And with the potential in 2022 to take over parts of the federal government again, and also entrenched now in the Supreme Court. So I'm going to argue, and also that in our politics today we have corrupt individuals. So on both parties, ruling and being more powerful than virtuous people who are following laws and who are following our highest ethical principles. And so we have a situation where there's a perversion of morality, and I'm using the word perversion. It's a controversial word, but I think I can argue effectively that it's one of the best words to describe what's going on, and also the word deontological. So let me first describe what I mean by deontological ethics, and also where it fits in the broader scheme of things. So in metaethics, so the ethics, the sort of the classification of the different ethical systems, metaethics is the sort of the over category. There's deontological ethics, of which there can be many deontological ethical systems. There is consequentialist ethics, which is pretty much only one. It's utilitarianism. And then there's virtue ethics, which are ethical systems that are so. Let me explain what each of them is. So, starting with the last one I mentioned, virtue ethics is about inculcating goodness into people. In other words, so virtue ethics is all about what inheres in different people. So is this person a virtuous person, and are they good? And it can be something that's helpful for teachers, also for people who are hiring people to do work, or people who are searching for a mate, or a girlfriend, boyfriend, or a partner, to see if they have certain virtues, certain things that you value, that you want in a person, and so virtue, that's virtue ethics, and then attached to individual people, and then there is consequentialist ethics, which is about, basically it's utilitarianism, which is that whatever is the good is whatever comes out good. So whatever the outcome, if the outcome is good, then it was a good thing. It is a good thing. So at its best, consequentialism is about studying conditions that create good outcomes, okay, and then trying to repeat those. But if you are exclusively a consequentialist, you eventually you can no longer, you can't abide by any rules, or you can't be using any. You're always looking to figure out how is it turn out, or how is it turning out, and it sort of serendipitously. And it is the ethics that's as closely associated with capitalism it is something that has emerged during the era of capitalism, where about opportunity, about the flow of different interactions in the market, and then figuring out whether something comes out well or not. And if it comes out well, then it was good. It's a good thing. And so, and then deontological ethics is about duty-based ethics. So it's about having a rule or rules that are considered to be good and following those rules, or things that are bad, avoiding the bad, but bad having to do with rules or with things that are bad rules, and then and following good rules. And deontological ethics, I would argue, is the envelope for a legal system to function at all, or function well, okay? That without a deontological ethical commitment by citizens of a country, or residents of a country, that the legal system, the laws cannot function as laws, because people do not feel duty bound to execute them. And for that matter, I mean, it's not just about law. You could have ethical principles that are in a particular community that is, a subculture or a religious group or whatever it is, and you are following the rules of that group, and you can feel duty bound to people in that group to adhere to those rules. And so deontology is that kind of ethics. And so the argument I'm making here is that, and I've thought about this in different ways throughout the last several, let's say, decade or change, that it seems to me as though in our society we have a great weakness in the area of deontological ethics. That, in my opinion, just to kind of lay my preferred metaethics out there, that it's a combination of all three metaethical systems. Sorry to be so wishy-washy in that way, but I feel like the biggest weakness in our society is in the area of deontological ethics. So I come across then as someone who is particularly focused on the deontological ethical aspect, even though I think virtue ethics and consequentialism have something to offer and are important as well. But the great weakness in our society is exactly in deontological ethics, and I think that many things flow from that. And I also add to my preference for deontological, or my emphasis on that, or my advocacy for that in this current society, in this current moment, is that a deontological commitment to truth-telling, is something that is a basis for an effective ethical system, and not just ethical system. Also, I mentioned the legal system. An effectively good society would also be committed to truth, committed to truth-telling, and that is a fundamental law within all the different laws or rule, because deontology is not necessarily about laws, but a rule within a deontological ethical system, that one is compelled to tell the truth and also to seek the truth where relevant, where necessary, where there is some dispute, or where there is some area of problematic area that needs resolution and clarification. So, I mean, it is something of an enlightenment, commitment to the enlightenment, let's say, within that framework that I prefer, okay? Anyway, in my perception, and I think I can provide lots of material or lots of evidence to suggest that it's not so simply in the eyes of this beholder. That I think the right wing has launched a concerted attack on deontological ethics, and in a lot of different forms. Okay, and that is it's become particularly intense since the 1960s, and some of it's now you can deontological ethics is in a way the matrix for the creation of new laws. Okay, so and some of the new laws that emerged out of the 1960s, like the civil rights laws and also environmental protection laws, were anathema to the right wing's view of the world, in particular the rightness of the powerful, who are often capitalists in our society, or people who are property owners, and who are and that these laws created certain conditions to being a good property holder, or to being a righteous person within the new laws. And furthermore, deontological duty-bound morality, for instance, expanding the circle of people that you were concerned about, women and people of color, and people with different gender identities and with different sexual orientations. And so expanding that group created all kinds of worry in the conservative elites and conservative minds, who were trying to stigmatize the whole idea of caring about laws that are abstract, but that compel, or rules that are abstract that compel people to change laws, or that lead to the process, the democratic process, to implement amendments to laws, to all democratic, in my view, best and most legitimately through the democratic process. And so that in the meanwhile, the right wing started to celebrate virtue ethics. Okay, or not just started, but continued its celebration of virtue ethics at a remove from the other kinds of ethics, and essentially isolating virtue ethics particularly from deontological ethics. Consequentialism is more close to, or can be close to certain, particularly libertarians and other people on the right wing. But there is the sort of, whatever, social conservatives who are only about virtue ethics, but a virtue ethics of a very particular type. And I am arguing here that it became a false virtue ethics, because a virtue ethics needs to have deontological elements to it. In other words, to be virtuous people need to follow some rules, okay? And so virtue ethics and deontological ethics are hard to divide if they are effective. But the right wing attempted to create a kind of a discourse that was all about personal virtue, and with implications that, for instance, if people have a different lifestyle, or a different or are of low socioeconomic status, or are a different race, even though that has been, they try to argue against them being racists, even though they show it in so many different ways, that they try to cover up what became increasingly immorality. So and some of this you could say it's inherent in capitalism to create the conditions for the undermining of deontological ethics in some way or another, and it's something that, because these new rules or new laws were threatening to capital and threatening to the accumulation process in capital, that they would reduce profit margins, that they were fought so vigorously and with such in such an organized fashion. I talked about the Gramscian, I think it was episode 26 or something, the Gramscian project of the right wing from at least the Powell Memo of 1971 to try to undermine reform in a progressive direction, and to try to steer to make government and the universities and so forth and so on serve capital and business more than sort of democracy broadly defined, or the polity broadly defined. So anyway, we have then, ironically, because this virtue ethics was unmoored from deontological ethics, we have then figures like Donald Trump, as I think I mentioned in the beginning of the video, who is an anti-virtuous person. So we have, and anyway, but before Donald Trump, we have people like Rush Limbaugh and so forth and so on, who there's a whole cultural antipathy to having a conscience, okay, and acting as if one has a conscience. And it becomes satirized, okay, by people like that now on Fox News, like Fox and Friends. So it's so much in the woodwork of right-wing discourse. Cynicism is a good way to describe this. Cynicism is about mocking people for having morality at all, saying like, you're a fool to want the world to be a better place, or to want to be a better person, or you to want me to be a better person. That you're a fool, that you're not accepting reality. And so, and this is the reality that they want you to believe in, which is that stasis or even return to some mythical past of some kind. And so, but anyway, you have people like, so this is where we get into the area of perversion. So perversion is, it's thought that, so the psychiatric, so perversion is a word that comes from, it's an old word that is not used anymore, and for some good reasons, because it was used as a homophobic slur against gay people, and it was used in a way to stigmatize also some sexual practices, that are things that people might enjoy in a consensual way with their partners, and so forth and so on. So, some of that is, much of that is considered to be very old-fashioned, okay? And the word has gotten in the psychiatric nosology, the psychiatric, terminology that people use to describe disorders and sexual disorders, among other things, is that they now talk about paraphilias, okay? So they talk about a particular a fetish or whatever it is that someone has, and if it's troubling to the person, if they think it's a problem and so forth and so on, that they could seek treatment for it, and it could be written down, and you could apply for money from an insurance company to help someone with that issue. But there are non-consensual paraphilias like exhibitionism and so on and so on, where there's an interaction with another person, and there's the flasher, for instance, is looking for shock in the face of the person they're flashing. The mostly, if it's a man, it's mostly a woman. But anyway, but it could go both ways. But anyway, but the arousal of the person with this issue is about shock and about turning something, overturning morality, and feeling like they're overturning morality, and the sense of, and I mean that's something that also happens. Some people feel like they're doing something that used to be called a perversion or whatever it is, and it's sexy because it's their, whatever, inverting what's supposed to be being good, they're being bad. Okay, so that goes on a lot. So people have the sense of, I'm being bad, so I'm excited about being bad. And so again, that's not something you're going to get legislate away and so forth and so on, and it's not something necessarily people should be worried about and about their own minds. But we have a political movement, though, that is delighting in overturning what is that they're enjoying doing damage to society as a whole, and especially led by people like Trump and who seem to be this classic, pervert kind of person, in the sense of being turned on by overturning morality just for the sake of doing it, just empty, not because you are representing a movement of sexual liberation or something, or a movement of changing our overall view of, but simply for your own pleasure, okay, literally for a momentary pleasure that you get, or for the sense of being powerful in doing that you get a sense of power by defying, and this gets into some of the defiance episodes that I've talked about, the right-wing defiance, that can be a high of some kind, or a arousal of some kind that allows people to feel turned on. Now that's a speculation. I'm not one of those people, and I don't know if that, but certainly a Trump rally is a time of great arousal, not just of anger. There's also anger and frustration, but there's also a sense that it's arousing for people to have the sense that Trump is dragging people in the dirt, dragging other people in the dirt, and he's dragging the people they want to see dragged in the dirt, and they're getting a sense of certainly a feeling of superiority over those people, and it may also be this kind of, it certainly seems as though perverting, saying I should be doing something else, or we should be doing something else even, but I'm going to turn it around so I feel good temporarily. And so I started this conversation, and I didn't really want to spend all the time talking about this particular phenomenon, because it sounds like it's somehow psychotherapeutic to, or it leads one to think that people should be seeking some kind of psychotherapy for this issue. But it certainly should. I'm looking at this movement and I'm thinking, what's going on that people are trying to do the opposite of what's right, okay? And people are doing the opposite. Not only do they want to, and you have politicians then. So we have a sociopathic. I've talked about the sociopathy in the Republican Party. There's also sociopathy within the Democratic Party, and to a lesser degree, and not as openly practiced and not as openly celebrated. But you have this atmosphere of perversion of morality is exactly what gives the signal to a sociopath to say, this is a carnival for me. This is where I can break laws or can ignore morality, and take advantage of other people by, as a con man, or con woman, to take their money, and we see many examples of this often on the right wing. But it's within a context, even beyond the Republican Party, where we've created a society where even within the provinces of the Democratic Party, we have so much corruption and some of this is basically money. It's about our electoral finance or campaign finance system. But there's not a purchase where we can induce shame in people, or not. Let's say we haven't tried hard enough to do that. So as a movement, but the shame is not, certainly it doesn't occur to people even to try to shame some of these people into doing the right thing, because they don't seem to be motivated by guilt feelings, in other words, internalized shame. So at least we need to create an atmosphere where they're and there are some movements who are trying to shame Kristen Sinema or shame Joe Manchin, but it doesn't occur to the people who could do it most easily, like Joe Biden or Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, to openly shame these people because of the weakness in our society of rule-based deontological morality, that has been weakened to some degree. And we have a transactional morality. It's more of a consequentialist morality in the sense of that if it turned out well, then that's good, rather than saying, thou shalt not take corporate PAC money, thou shalt not ignore your constituents in favor of corporations and big donors. There isn't a very strong. I mean, there are individuals. Okay, so the progressives within the Congress seem to be operating more strongly along the lines of or reinforcing deontological duty-based morality and they're making some headway, and so I'm not throwing up my hands and say there's no progress in this area. But I think we would do better as a society if we start to shame people who are not following the best reality-based laws. So using reality, so having a deontological commitment to truth and making sure that we're pressing for people to recognize reality and start acting on it in the best way possible for our common good. And so anyway, maybe this was all very abstract, or maybe this is exactly what you wanted to hear, and you feel like it's amazing, the insightful and so forth and so on. One way or the other, please comment below if your thoughts, and also please like the video if you liked it, and also please subscribe to my channel if you find some of these videos interesting to you. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video.